Let me begin by saying that I've just learned that Attorney General Beau Biden was taken to the hospital this morning, and let me just say that I wish for him a very speedy recovery, and that our thoughts and prayers are with he and his family at this time. I want to thank you for being here this afternoon. This morning, I met with Governor Jack Markell and presented him with the findings of the independent review I conducted at his request over these past 4 months. He has taken the report to Dover, where he is briefing leadership on both parties from both chambers now. I have had copies of the report made available for your convenience this afternoon, and the governor's office is making it available to the public online through their homepage as I speak. I have also asked the webmaster here at Widener Law to make a link available to it from our website, which should be going up right now as well. Now, I'm here to discuss my findings with you, and I want to start by noting that in 2007, the National Conference of State Legislatures identified sexual offenders and predators as number 5 on its top 10 policy issues for states. While some may consider child sexual exploitation an unusual phenomenon, experts contend that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys are predicted to become victims of child abuse, and the number of incidents may actually be underreported. I have spent the last 4 months talking with people up and down the state of Delaware and across this country to ascertain not only what happened here, but whether Delaware's laws and procedures are up to the task of keeping our children safe. I have concluded that red flags were consistently missed. A mass tragedy of this magnitude may have been preempted if the individuals directly involved had been alert, less willing to give Bradley the benefit of the doubt, and if they had scrupulously followed the law. Systems were in place to catch a perpetrator, but they were either not properly assessed or, when called upon, human and mechanical error prevented the appropriate actions from being taken. The allegations against Dr. Bradley are breathtaking in their violent nature, in their sheer number, and in their duration. There is a misconception in our society that people who hold positions of trust are infallible. But in reality, pedophiles can be master manipulators who cross all ages, races, and status levels. From these tragic circumstances, we must learn that just because an allegation is shocking does not mean it cannot be true. With an eye for strengthening Delaware's laws and procedures, I have presented the governor this morning with a list of 68 recommendations. They are broken down into groups for which they are intended, including the executive branch, the Board of Medical Practice, the Department of Justice, the General Assembly, the Children's Advocacy Center, the Medical Society of Delaware, courts, police, hospitals, and the public. Some are broad, like evaluating whether deputy attorney generals are too risk-averse in taking hard cases. Others are more specific, like ensuring that licensing boards have access to any criminal report. Some invoke more public involvement, like my recommendation to open the medical practice board hearings to the public and make their hearing outcomes more public. I would like to offer my gratitude to many people who took the time to answer my questions and to help me in my research, and to my staff and everyone here at Widener Law who helped me run the law schools while completing this important public service. I am humbled by the trust and confidence Governor Markell placed in me when he asked me to undertake this review, and I thank him publicly for this opportunity. I hope that through my work and the conversations it sparks, Delaware and the nation will have a better understanding of how children should be protected and how state agencies must work in a more coordinated fashion to help prevent, detect, and bring to justice anyone who would harm our children. Again, thank you for being here today, and at this time I am happy to take questions.
Dean, this sounds like a colossal failure all across the entire state of Delaware. Is that how you would categorize it? You said that there were only 2 people who tried to do something about it?
Well, I won't characterize it in terms of only 2 people who tried to do something about it. I think there were 2 people who were alert enough to know what was going on and who actually attempted to do something about it. But the end result was still the same.
And so can you talk...
and Bradley's sister?
I'm sorry?
You're talking about the nurse from BB and the Bradley sister?
Actually, I'm talking about, if you count the nurse from BB, I would include 3 people as opposed to 2. The nurse from BB, Bradley's sister, and then the very first police officer who tried to get attention about this case, and that would be Lieutenant
Brown. Right?
Officer Brown, Lieutenant Brown, yes.
Why did you name the judge? It seemed like you named everybody, but are you giving extra deference to the judge here?
No. The reason why I have not named the judge is because I have not been able to confirm that the name that I have is absolutely correct.
So can you talk a little bit more broadly? I know you have the 68 specific recommendations.
Yes.
How was this allowed to happen for so long?
Well, that's the $64,000 question. And I think several things happened. First and foremost, as I said in my introductory remarks, people could not believe, that Bradley could be involved in anything like this. And I must be careful about what I say because he has not been convicted of anything as of yet. But first of all, when you have people of trust, I mean, look at the priest scandal that's been going on for quite some time. People in positions of trust are given certain deference, and we just suspend belief that they can be involved in anything so sinister as child abuse and child sexual exploitation. So I think, first of all, many flags were missed. Opportunities were missed. People weren't careful. People didn't check as they should have. And the end result is this went on for much too long. I hate to admit this being a lawyer, but sometimes the criminal justice system has limits. And because of standards of proof, the Constitution, and a variety of other things, when you're trying to solve a particular case and bring someone to justice in terms of an arrest, those who are doing that, prosecutors, have to be very careful about how they proceed. However, not only do we have a criminal justice system, we do also have a civil administrative system. And the civil administrative system was not tasked in this particular case. I say in my report that I think that had so many clues not been lost, had communication been better, if the suspect could not have been brought to trial earlier, there should have been other avenues by which to scrutinize his behavior, and that would have been through the civil process.
You say some people tried to come forward. Where would you say the ball was dropped? Can you pinpoint of where?
Well, it's in the report. I mean, it's hard to stitch all this together, but in terms of reporting to the medical board, I'm talking on the civil side. When the medical society received the letter from the sister, it was not forwarded to the Board of Medical Practice, as far as we can tell, as it should have been and taken on as a real case. Now, my report talks in great detail about what happened. I don't want to take a lot of time with that, but that would have been a way back in 2004 to shine some light on this particular case. in 1996 or 97 at BB Hospital, they did engage in an investigation, but it was somewhat partial. They didn't ask all of the questions. And as you often know, it's not so much about the answers, it's about the questions that you ask. Back then, this state has been on notice, as far as I can tell, since the middle 90s, that there may have been an issue with Bradley. But people weren't talking to each other in ways that would have brought this situation to light. And it wasn't necessarily people were intentionally covering things up, as I can tell. It was just the near misses that were taking place. People weren't scrupulously following the law. It says if you think that a physician, and I'm recasting what the code says, but if you think that a physician is impaired or should not be practicing for a variety of reasons, there are certain actors who are supposed to report that to a certain entity. And that entity is to be prepared to accept that information and do investigations. So balls were dropped all along the way.
Could you elaborate on the risk averse in the AG's department? What do you mean by that, and what needs to be done to address that?
Well, that's not a specific finding in terms of the Department of Justice, but in general. Because child abuse cases are often, from what I understand, are often difficult to bring to trial because of the age of the child, whether or not the child's recollection will be good, inherent bias between adults and children. You know, we don't believe children often enough, and that's one of the things that I talk about. The fact of the matter is, when a prosecutor is trying to figure out whether this is a case to bring or not, he or she has to weigh all of these things. And add to that, you have someone who was prominent in a community, in a small community, like Dr. Bradley, who had a reputation of quote-unquote loving children. You think twice before jumping the gun. You want to make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row before you do something like that. You don't want the case to fall apart on you. And I want to be careful about what I say, because this is an ongoing prosecution. But these are the kinds of things that prosecutors are, among other things, are weighing when they are trying to determine whether or not they should arrest and what kind of charge to bring. And so that's what I mean by prosecutors, whether it's in this Department of Justice or any other Department of Justice, because they are often, their feet are held to the fire about their win-loss record. Perhaps that may have some bearing on just what kind of cases they are willing to bring, without being absolutely sure. I'm not saying that that is what happened in this case, but it is a factor to consider.
On the matter of the name of the judge, are there any other areas where you didn't get information that you wanted? I think you said you couldn't confirm it. Why not after that?
Because in terms of checking sources, as you do, you like to have at least I hope you do, one or more reliable sources about a piece of information. And I did have a name, but when I checked that name, I could not get confirmation about that party as to whether or not he or she was the actual person involved.
From the court system?
Yes.
They didn't want to talk about it?
That's correct.
Did you lie?
No.
That must hamper your job, obviously. I mean, what do you do about that if you're trying to correct the mistakes?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, I don't think anyone is without notice about what happened here. And I'm not here to make judgment particularly on that particular aspect of this case. My real role is to be more prospective than retrospective. It would have been nice to have more information about that particular aspect of what happened, but I think there's enough information in here, more than enough, to understand the full scope of what's going on. And without that kind of cooperation, it would be irresponsible for me to speculate. And so that's why it's left out.
But doesn't that speak to the problem of
Let me take the phone call.
I just wanted a follow-up question.
I'll get back to you. Let me take the phone call. Yes.
Did the medical society ever indicate that they tried to get a clean copy of the letter that got gobbled up in the fax machine? Or were they just comfortable that, well, that's all we see?
Well, I'm not so sure that they even recognized that it was garbled. I can't speak to what they did, I believe at this point in time they do have a copy if they never had it before. But at the point in time that I talked with them, I'm not so sure that they realized that there was a problem.
But at the same time, you said the other concerns were enough to get to the board.
I think so. When you look at the totality of the circumstances, the letter itself, the facts covered, the notes that are written, there are a lot of different things, and I addressed them in the report itself. There are a lot of different signals. What I started off talking about, flags, to say, well, there may be something here, and even more importantly than what was written in the letter, what was written on the cover of the facts, what was written in terms of the hand notes, is the reference in the Medical Society's notes itself that said this is a case, and I'm paraphrasing, that perhaps should go to the Board of Medical Practice. They acknowledged that themselves, but apparently there was some disconnect, and for some reason it didn't get there.
Outside your role as an educator and an attorney, what's your first, second, and third impressions? How do you react?
Well, I'm very saddened. I'm very saddened for the families and the children who have had to go through this. I am particularly upset with the fact that this has gone on so long, and it's tragic. I am hopeful that we have learned a lesson, not only here in Delaware, but across the nation, about understanding how government works, how it should work, and when it doesn't, what needs to happen. In my conversation with the governor this morning, I talked to him about more multidisciplinary training for police officers and court personnel and prosecutors so they understand this phenomena of pedophilia and other types of child abuse, that we get beyond the myths. We really, as a society, have to push past the strong tendency to not believe children when they talk about sexual exploitation. Could there be false charges? Sure, there could be, but more likely than not, from what the experts and researchers say, when a child talks about being sexually exploited and gives graphic descriptions of what happens, typically they are telling you the truth, particularly if they are young, because without having that kind of experience, they have no vocabulary or no experience with that, so what could they possibly be describing? So I think the first thing that all of us, we need to do is to be more vigilant and alert, and I don't want to say that you can't trust anybody, because we have to trust people, but I think we ought to be more astute about how people who want to exploit our children operate. And I hope that this is a lesson for the nation. I think that this case has not only implications for the state of Delaware, not only for the United States, but I think that this case has international implications. The fact, yes?
Hello, Dean?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Jamie Tarabay from NTR.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask, in the course of the 4 months of your investigations, were you able to speak to everyone that you wanted to, everyone on the medical board, everyone that's, the directors of the hospital, and were you satisfied with the conversations that you had with these people?
I was able to speak with most of the people I wanted to talk to. As to whether or not I was satisfied, it would depend on how you define satisfied.
As an investigator who wanted to know the facts, were you satisfied?
I can't say that I'm satisfied with some of the answers they gave me or the rationale they gave me for their answers. I was not putting anyone under oath, so I can't tell, I couldn't make them swear to tell the truth. But I think for the most part, people were very cooperative. I think for the most part, they told me the truth. There are a few people that may not have been as forthcoming as I would have liked, but you live with that. In terms of I forgot what the other aspect of your question was.
So that was where you got to speak to everyone that you wanted to.
There was one doctor I could not speak to because upon advice of his attorney, he is being sued. He's involved in multiple suits, and because his attorney advised him not to speak with me, one of the doctors, I was not able to speak to him, and I did really want to talk to him. But there was nothing I could do with that.
Was there a lot of resistance from the heads of the hospital?
Actually, no.
Okay.
They were extremely cooperative. And in fact, I've met with folks from the hospital on several occasions. I think my report, I said I've talked to 70 some odd people, and that does not count the multiple times that I've talked to some of the same people. But the hospital was very cooperative in talking with me.
Why did they say that they didn't investigate the other complaints by the nurse?
They have no...
Inappropriate touching beyond the catheterization. I mean, there were certainly flags, right?
Yes, there certainly were flags. There is no explanation.
Well, the matter of
Did you get a copy of the search warrant that was denied in 2008?
Say again?
Did you get a copy of the search warrant that was denied in 2008?
Yes, I did.
And wasn't the judge's name on it when he denied it?
Oh, no, I don't have the actual search. I'm sorry, I misspoke. No, I don't.
You called the judge that
Yeah.
who denied it. He wouldn't talk to you, or he just blew off your call?
First of all, I did not get the search warrant that was denied in 2008. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I don't have that search. I don't think there's any record. I'm not quite sure what went on, and that's why I'm unwilling to speculate as to who it actually is, what was actually said, because I don't have that record.
But when you called the judge himself, did he?
Would not acknowledge.
He would not. Oh, he would not acknowledge.
That's right.
Okay, I understand. Okay.
Okay.
Make sure I got it.
There was another
Was
question.
that
Yeah, I
in the
wanted to
police-
follow-
in the prosecutor's
Excuse me, there's another question.
warrant?
Yes.
I wanted to follow up before getting back on that topic. You say here, you talk about the Medical Society of Delaware, a lack of action by a medical regulatory board with a reputation for protecting the very individuals it is meant to police. So you have that aspect of it, and you have this aspect with the judge, where it seems like they're protecting each other there too.
Well, I can't comment on that because I don't know what the motivation of the judge may or may not have been in this case. As I told you, I could not access that information, and so I will not speculate on that.
Can you talk a little bit more, though, about the Medical Regulatory Board? and
That I can talk
reputation?
about. Yes. What would you like to know?
Well, characterize it if you would.
Well, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of the medical board. And I think that the medical board recognizes it themselves. In fact, I've had long conversations with the heads of the board and the division that regulates that board, and I think there is no disagreement that they can do a better job. I think that Delaware is not, the board is not regarded very highly in the state of Delaware, and that is confirmed by national surveys that have been done. I think Public Citizen did one maybe 3 or 4 years ago. When I talk to people, frontline people, physicians and non-physicians, they have questions about how the board operates and to what extent they have the kind of power or sanctions that they need to have over the regulated. In short, some feel that the board has been protective, as I say in my report. I think it's quite clear, protective of doctors as opposed to protective of the public health. And so for all of the reasons mentioned in my report, it is one of the agencies that I think should really spend some concentrated time thinking over its mission, thinking about and doing something about the way it is organized. There will probably be some laws that will have to be amended and or enacted to give the board either more power or to rearrange certain aspects of the board. So there's a laundry list there in the report of the kinds of things that need to be addressed by the board. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Good. Other questions?
Can you say the doctor that you weren't able to speak to? So there's one doctor that you weren't able to?
Yes, Lowell Scott.
On the matter of the gap in the facts, was there any, like, a diligence, curiosity, how did that occur? You know, like you said before, I think that they have now the letter that we didn't have at that time.
Are you speaking about the letter of Linda Barnes to the Medical Society?
Correct.
And what was your question again?
Was there any lack of diligence there? How, you know, on a crucial bit of information, was there enough sufficient curiosity about it?
I don't think so. I really don't think so. I don't know what happened. And they can't seem to explain to me in any sufficiency what happened, other than there's a gap there, that when the letter was first read, a lot of it was about Bradley and his financial housekeeping or lack thereof, and that they perhaps didn't see it as the typical kind of case that they would be involved in. Typical meaning you must understand that this particular committee deals with, I think it's physician's assistants, things like substance abuse and the typical kinds of problems like that. So,
Was it substance abuse part of the allegation?
yes, it was.
So so it is something that they should be involved in, right?
Well, I would think so, and that's what my report says, but depending on where you read the letter, how the letter cuts off, and I don't have it here right in front of me. There was hand-scribbled notes, there were gaps in the letter, there were a lot of things missing. But to be direct about your answer, yes, I do think it was something that should have been probed. Not only that, issues of possible child neglect was raised, and that was in the part of the letter that could be read without the gap. There were a number of things. But if you are somewhat myopic in terms of what you think your role might be, you might not catch that. And so I think this is a lesson to those who are involved with referrals to make sure, first of all, that you've got all the information, and secondly, that you think outside of the box. And that's my whole point, I think, in terms of this report, that when dealing with these kinds of issues, if you don't think outside of the box, whether it's the criminal prosecution or the civil investigation, you will miss important pieces of information that could end up in a tragic way.
Is it your
Yes.
sense that in 2005...
Just a minute, there's another question. Go ahead.
Dean Ammons.
The launch investigation...
Excuse me, there's another question on the floor. Yes.
Dean Ammons, in your investigation, was there anything that indicated to you, I mean, you talked about children and listening to children when it comes to matters of sexual abuse and listening to what they have to say, but all the people that surrounded this man, was there anything that indicated to you that they were afraid of this man, that they had this like God complex, like that he was a doctor and that he couldn't possibly be guilty of this? And was there anything that you came across like that in your investigation?
Well, this is what I find interesting and somewhat ironic. When I talk to people about Dr. Bradley in terms of his personality, they would, and these are their words and not mine, would say that he was strange, he was weird, and even somewhat disagreeable with some of his peers. But almost in the same breath, they would say, but he's a great doctor. He's a great doctor. And the fact that many of his patients were the children of prominent people in that part of Delaware, in Sussex County, and perhaps even in Kent County, is an indication that people thought he was a very good pediatrician. So it's somewhat strange and ironic in that respect, that on the one hand, he is thought of as, in terms of his own interpersonal skills with adults, you know, they thought that he was a bit unusual, eccentric, but on the other hand, with children, they thought he was the best thing. So I don't know how that cuts. Other questions? All right.
I want to ask about did you think in 2005, with the verbal communications that the medical board received, I guess through their attorney, that they had enough information that they should have launched something back then? Not, you know, a lot of this investigation is whether they should have received the information, but they did receive some information about the 2005 Milton investigation? Is it your conclusion that they should have launched an investigation?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well,
Which parties?
The prosecutor contacted the lawyer for the medical board and told them about this investigation. It's in your report. Do you think that the medical board had enough information that they should have launched an investigation? Or were they hiding behind the statutory we can get a letter?
I don't know what fact you're referring to, because throughout my report it says the medical board states that it had never received anything and didn't know anything until 2009 when they read about the arrests in the paper.
No, I'm talking about with Tischer, the lawyer for the medical board, the Attorney General assigned to the medical board. He received a report.
I never said that.
According to Welch, he determined that Deputy Attorney General Michael Welch represented the medical board. He sent Tischer an email asking if he represented the board. Welch claimed he followed a phone call to Tischer.
That's correct.
But Tischer was never told, I guess, that he...
If you read a little further, I think the report says that Tishner says he didn't know anything about the facts, and he did not want to know anything about the facts because of his own role with the medical board, which requires a separation of functions. I think I'm hoping that that's in the next sentence. Is that in there?
I'm trying to think and talk at the same time.
Yeah, but...
Well, so it's your contention that they never had any tangible information, either written or verbally.
Correct.
Right, even though there were calls made to that attorney.
You talking about to Tishner?
Yes.
Yes. And I can't speak ultimately for what the board may or may not have had, because I don't know.
Did you say anything to the governor about the degree of urgency to reform the top
Yes. Yeah, we talked about it, and that's the reason why he's down at Dover right now, talking with the legislature, General Assembly, about some of these reforms. I don't know that they will adopt them all. I think some of them will be short-term. I think some of them will be much longer-term kinds of conversations. I will say, for example, that some of these recommendations are already being implemented or in the process of being implemented by the Division of Licensing and the Medical Board. So some of these things should be taking place as we speak. And in all fairness to them, when I talked to their division heads, some of the recommendations actually came from them, having spotted some things. So I think it will be, some things will be short-term, some things will be much longer-term. Yes?
Yeah, Dean Ammons, with this investigation concluded and your recommendations forwarded to the governor and the legislature, I mean, would you guarantee that this would never happen again to children or
Absolutely
patients?
not. I would not guarantee it, because pedophilia, I think I closed the report by saying that, first of all, pedophilia is not a new phenomenon, that the cases are more underreported than accurately reported. It would be my hope, my desire, that this would never happen again. But this time, the accusations are against a doctor. There are other pedophilias, people who are engaged in pedophilia, who may be teachers, coaches, clergy, or none of those professionals, just who engage in this kind of vice. And so, no, there's nothing to guarantee that this won't happen again. What I hope will happen, that it will be much harder for it to happen, and that it will be recognized much sooner, and that all of the entities in government will be so alert, so aware, so educated, that when the first hint of something of this nature happens, they will be ready to move, will take action, will be decisive, and will stem this just horrible phenomenon.
Can you talk a little bit about the first red flag that Delaware received in 1994 when they licensed them and they learned about the Pennsylvania investigation? Should this have given them pause that maybe a doctor was jumping from one state to another, running from a problem, settling in this little beach town?
Well, what I learned about this was simply that there was an investigation in Philadelphia just shortly before Doctor came here, and it was conducted by the police department and their Pennsylvania's board. And they determined that the charge was unfounded. And so that information was sent here to Delaware, and as a result of that information, Delaware communicated back to Pennsylvania that in essence we accept what you say since you are there at the site and you have more resources to investigate this than us trying to do this cross state borders. And so if a state agency says to another state agency, we've investigated, we think there's nothing here, I can't blame the state agency, the receiving state agency, for not going any further with it. But I do think, and this is one of the recommendations I have made to the governor, that this kind of information, because you want to be careful, you don't, you know, complaints come and you don't want to falsely accuse people and ruin somebody's reputation because of an accusation. Having said that though, if this particular piece of information had somehow been filed away and accessible by someone in this state who would be inputting information as these complaints were coming along, the subsequent complaints. You know, one complaint you say, okay. Two complaints, maybe you say, maybe there's something wrong. But when you start getting 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 complaints, if you have a way to access that history, then you're able to do something about it. And I don't think Delaware has been organized in that way, and one of my recommendations is that we become organized in that way so that you can access historical information. And in fact, the Child Protection Accountability Commission has been for some time talking about just this very issue, to have a way to have a history of complaints so that when a person's name comes up, that there is a history of what's going on. Typically what happens is information gets transmitted in the name of the victim. So you can have a victim or an alleged victim. You can have a victim here, a victim here, a victim here, and they're not, that information is not warehoused somewhere where it all connects. If you do it by the alleged perpetrator, you might get a picture, a fuller picture sooner.
Well, it seems that, you know, Beebe never got a copy of that report, and then when Beebe had its issue with him, they didn't do a full investigation, nor did they give it to the medical board, so there was no sharing of any information, when that could have, you know, been
Yes.
a red flag back then to take action.
Yes, and I have said, I think hopefully repeatedly in this report, that shared information, cross-training people, setting up data banks so that any law enforcement person or child protection person can have access to information about alleged perpetrators. And that this information does need to be shared. Exactly right.
But Dean?
Yes.
Dean, this is 2010.
Yes.
You would think that all these systems were already in place? I mean, isn't that surprising?
Yeah, it is shocking. And I don't know how many other jurisdictions have them either, in terms of a way to track in that way. I know some states are a little more forward-looking than others as it relates to reporting physicians, but one would hope that in this day and age, with technology readily available, that would happen. But someone has to know that there's a problem of this sort before you access that kind of technology. Now we know.
Which one of the recommendations are being worked on right now?
I don't know. I gave it to the governor just a couple hours ago, and I'm not sure which ones. As I said earlier, I do know some within the medical board. They've already begun, or I should say the Division of Licensing, they've already begun to try to do some things there. But I don't know.
Going forward, do you have any plans on being involved in the legislative agenda, or this is your role and you're out?
I'm out. I've got 2 law schools to run. I think that will keep me busy for a while. I appreciate the honor and being asked to do this, and I hope that this is my legacy, or at least one of my legacies, to the state of Delaware, to the children of Delaware and their families. And I hope that if one child can be saved from child sexual exploitation because of this particular process, then I'll be very happy.
Do you have children of your own?
I do not.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Dean.
Thank you.